These are the weekly Bible lessons that I'm teaching my daughters, 10 and 13, so that they have a strong understanding of the Bible. Today I'm going to take a few minutes to teach you how to teach this to your kids, and you can look in the description to find out how to get the PDF. The word Bible comes from the Greek word biblos, that just means book. And you can reinforce this with your kids by talking about the English word bibliography or the Spanish word biblioteca, which means library. So Bible just means book, but it's not just any old book. The Bible is the book. For the last 2,000 years, the number one reason that people learned to read was so that they could read the Bible. Even today, the Bible is still the number one best-selling book, with about 100 million print Bibles sold every year. You need to make this part personal. When I taught this to my girls, I made sure that they knew that I, their father, read the Bible every single day. So what is the Bible? Well, it's a collection of a lot of different books written by a lot of different authors. We don't know exactly how many authors there were. It's at least a few dozen. And at this point, I asked my 10-year-old how many are in a few dozen. The Bible was not written in English because English as a language didn't even exist back then. The Bible is mostly written in ancient Hebrew and ancient Greek. When we read the Bible in English, we're reading a translation of those older languages into something that we can understand. Here, my daughters and I discussed that there are a lot of different translations, and my main point to them was that almost every verse in almost every single English translation means the same thing. It's just worded slightly differently. We also talked about how the Bible is a Jewish book. It was written by Jewish people, and it comes from Jewish culture. The only author in the Bible who wasn't Jewish was Luke. He wrote the Gospel according to Luke, and he also wrote Acts, and Luke was Paul's personal physician. The events of the Bible didn't happen in Kansas, and they didn't take place in Oz. The events of the Bible took place in the general area around the Mediterranean Sea. This is a satellite picture from NASA's Blue Marble project, and it's actually a photograph of the Earth in April, I think, of 2004, and they've removed the clouds. So all the white that you're seeing is snow on top of mountains. I chose to use this image instead of a map because I didn't want my daughters getting confused and distracted by modern nations and modern national boundaries. You can, of course, use Google Maps if you prefer. Brought to you by Jubilant Reader, the Phonics software I made to help my own daughter learn how to read. We then spent a few minutes talking about different places on this map. We talked about India, we talked about the ancient Persian Empire, we talked about the Greek Isles, Arabia, Rome, and the Roman Empire. I also tried to make this personal. My wife is from Spain, and my children have been to Spain to visit their family. And I tried to point out different places on the map, especially the white dots in Spain, which are mountains, most of which they've actually been to. Pretty much every place mentioned in the Bible is shown in this image. Paul, of course, was imprisoned in Rome. All the churches mentioned in the book of Revelation were in modern-day Turkey. Of course, all those churches mentioned in the book of Revelation are gone now because about 500 years ago, Islamic forces invaded and conquered that area. In fact, the famous song, Istanbul was Constantinople, is actually about the Islamic conquest of a Christian nation. That wasn't the only Islamic conquest. The ancient Egyptians weren't Arab. The ancient Mesopotamians weren't Arab. The Palestinians weren't either. In fact, Egypt, Palestine, and Mesopotamia were all solidly Christian before they were invaded by the Islamic Arabs. The Old Testament takes place in this area. And except for the modern nation of Israel, we tend to think of all of this region as being very backwards. And it is backwards. But 4,000 years ago, things were very different. This region, known as the Fertile Crescent, was where you get the first cities, the first agriculture, and the first writing. So the fact that the Old Testament is taking place here shows that God was already working in the most advanced civilizations in the world for that time. For instance, Abraham traveled up from his hometown, the Sumerian city of Ur, up along a major trade route, down through Canaan, Israel, Palestine, lots of different names for the same place depending on the time, and he ends up in ancient Egypt. By the way, Memphis, Tennessee is named after an ancient Egyptian capital, Memphis. And in ancient Egyptian, Memphis means white walls because apparently the walls of that ancient city were painted bright white. And it was very impressive in the sun. The Bible is very old. In fact, some parts of it are so old that we're really not sure exactly how old they are. The oldest parts are probably 3,000 to 3,500 years old. Even the newest book in the Bible, which we think is the book of Revelation, was written about 2,000 years ago. So you want to make sure that your kids know that even after thousands of years, the Bible is still the #1 best-selling book of all time, even today. And that means that there's something really special about the Bible. If you can, you want to really try and make this real to your kids. So one of the things that my daughters and I talked about is how their mom and I walked the Camino de Santiago pilgrimage this past summer to see the bones of Jesus' disciple James, who's buried in Spain. And he was the brother of John, who wrote the Gospel and who also wrote the book of Revelation. The Bible is big, and you can talk about how many verses there are. You can talk about what a verse is. You can hold up a physical Bible and talk about how many pages are in it. You can also use this diagram that we're going to talk about more in future lessons. And here I've color-coded all the pages so you can see the books. You want your kids to take away that the Bible is really special. Before modern times, this huge book had to be copied by hand. That took a lot of effort, and yet every single generation for thousands of years thought that the Bible was so important, they made sure that there was a fresh copy waiting for their kids.